Hello and welcome. I'm Mariana Trapnell, President and Chief Excel Geek here at Accelerations. Today, we need to talk briefly about an important topic when it comes to macros, and that's whether to enable or disable them. You see, macros can do just a quick little format that changes your font red and bold, but they can also be programmed to perform 30 different steps as soon as you open the file. That's all well and good if you're the one who programmed it to perform those 30 steps and you know exactly what each of those 30 steps is. However, if you get the file from someone else, particularly from the internet, from someone you don't know, there's a small chance that the macro could also contain code to do something malicious, like locking your computer, or adding a virus to it, or even transferring files somewhere else. So I don't mean to scare you away from macros, and definitely not from Excel. So the good news is that you can control how macros work when you open a file. Let's take a look. All right, so if you saved your personal workbook when you closed Excel after recording a macro in the last couple of weeks, you may have seen a message the next time you opened Excel that asked if you wanted to enable macros. The message might look like one of these two options on the screen here, and they make it really obvious that you're opening a file which contains macros and lets you choose right away what you want to do with it, especially this one because it will actually show you the workbook name that you're opening that contains the macros. So you can just hit enable and you're good to go. If it's not asking about your personal workbook, then it will just list another file that contains a macro. And this is where you want to be careful. If it's a file someone else that you know has created, then you're probably okay to enable them. Especially if they've added buttons to the file for you so that you can do some quick actions like sorting or hiding rows or working with your budget information, you definitely want to enable them because otherwise you won't be able to use those buttons. And of course, if it's your personal workbook, then you can safely choose to enable macros because you know what's in it. And you probably want to use the macros you created last week, right? Now, on the other hand, if it's a file name you don't recognize, or it's a file you just downloaded from the internet to try out, you probably want to choose to disable macros until you or someone else can check the code behind the scenes and figure out exactly what it will do when you enable it. Okay, so if you don't get this pop-up message, the other type of message you might get is a yellow bar across the top. And in this one, you can click the button to enable content, or if you don't want to enable it right now, there will be an X over at the far right of the bar. It'll be up in this area here that you can actually just close it and that will disable them. Now, the yellow bar isn't nearly as obvious as the pop-up message, and if you're like me, you might just kind of dive right in when you get the file and forget to enable macros. Then in a few minutes, that yellow bar might actually go away on its own, and when you click a macro button, if someone set one up for you, then it'll just do nothing. And unfortunately, at that point, all you can really do is save your file, don't forget to save it, and then close it, and then reopen it to get that yellow bar back again so you can actually enable the macros. All right, now whether you enable macros by the pop-up message or by the yellow bar, the next thing you might be asked is whether you want to make it a trusted document. Basically, Excel's asking whether you want to automatically enable the macros the next time you open this specific file, or if you want to be asked each time. If you hit no right now, you can still open the file next time. It'll just ask you again if you want to enable the macros. So if you control the file, you know what the macros do in it, and you can probably make it trusted. It's a lot easier than having to remember to enable the macros every time, especially when you've got that yellow bar to worry about. So if it's a file you trust from someone else, you probably want to make it trusted as well so that the macros run properly when you see them in the future. As a side note, I do see some cases where people choose to trust the file in Citrix. So if you use that, sometimes it will still ask you each time whether you want to enable macros and trust the file. And I haven't found a way to stop it asking yet, so you just have to keep enabling and trusting every time. One last thing before we wrap up this topic. In Excel, you do have the option to change your macro settings. It's under File in newer versions, or it can be found in the Office button in older versions of Excel. You go to Options, Trust Center Settings, and then Macro Settings over here on the left. And you're given 4 different options to choose from. So disable all macros without notification isn't really useful, because then you're never going to be asked if you want to enable macros and you'll never be able to use them. Disable macros with notification gives you the pop-up messages that we talked about, and that's generally the one you want to have selected. Disabling all macros except digitally signed macros, you could do that, but there aren't many macros that are digitally signed, so you're going to end up with a whole bunch of macros disabled as well. And then enable macros, not recommended. As it says, potentially dangerous code can run. And the thing is, if you enable all macros automatically, a file could actually just open up in the background in Excel. You'd never know it's running, and it could be just running the macro code right there and then. All right, so I'm going to hit cancel, but you would hit OK if you change any settings. Cancel. So that's all I wanted to cover today. A bit more theoretical, but as you probably figured out, it's very important to be aware of what you're choosing to enable. And it's also just a teensy bit important to know how to enable your own macros. Otherwise, there's not much point in watching future videos here, because you wouldn't be able to use your macros going forward, right? So as always, I'd appreciate it if you'd leave a comment below and share what you thought about the information today. Have you fallen into the same trap as me, forgetting to enable your macros on that yellow bar and then wondering why the heck your buttons don't work? All right, we'll talk again soon. In the meantime, have a great week.